Hello all, and welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Coolbaugh. Today I have with me a very special guest, Sandra L. Rostirolla. Sandra, how are you doing today?
Hi, Daniel. I am great. Thank you so much for inviting me on your show. Very excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited that you're here because I was just talking to another author earlier, and it's so funny that she was at the Comic-Con I was at because I had no idea she was going to be there. And so when we were talking at the Comic-Con, I was like, she started following me on Twitter. So then I came home and I went to go follow her, and I realized I was already following her because of TikTok. And it's funny because that's where I found you as well. And it seems that TikTok has taken place of Twitter for me, and it's easier to find people on TikTok like yourself. So I threw out, a message to you and quite a few people on TikTok this week. And I was excited. You were one of 5 people to get back to me and that we were able to schedule. So it's been a great resource recently. So I was really happy that, we could connect and get this going for you. So I'm excited for, to get all the book talkers on here, as many as I can. So we'll start with that first question there, Sandra. What has your writing journey been like up until this point?
Wow, my writing journey. I like to call myself an accidental novelist.
Oh, I like that.
I know. Prior to writing my novel, I was actually writing screenplays.
Oh, wow.
And my husband's a composer, and he decided one day that he wanted to write a ballet. And I went, oh, well, that's cool. I'll be your librettist, because a ballet story is very short. There's like 8 to 15 pages.
Okay.
And so I'm like, great, let's go ahead and do this. And we got inspiration from Leonardo da Vinci paintings, for the different characters and everything.
Yeah.
And so it started off with basically 5 acts, because that's what a ballet normally is, 5 acts. And very simple titles: Cecilia in Plockton, Cecilia Goes on a Journey, these 5 basic titles. And so then I started writing, and I'd hand over the pages to my husband, and he kept saying, that's great, keep writing. And so I did. I kept writing and kept writing. I got to about 90 pages.
Oh, wow.
And I handed it to him, and he said, oh, I'm not going to do the ballet anymore, because he got really busy with his film score work. And I literally just looked at these 90 pages and I said, well, what am I supposed to do with these? And he said, write the novel. And so, but initially I really didn't. I resisted, because if you think about, I don't know if you've ever written screenplays before, but the reason I liked screenplays is they're quite, what's the word? You can write something like there's a house, but you don't have to describe the house.
Yeah.
The set designer does that. There's a whole group of people that are going to do all this for you.
Totally different style.
Totally different. And so, but when it came to writing the book, I realized I needed to know everything. I needed to know my characters, their backstory. I needed to know the mythology. I couldn't just say, here's the goddess of light and here's her dark shadow. I had to come up with, well, where did they come from? How did they exist? And I really resisted. But then I just kept thinking about it, and it just grew like a seed, right? You're a writer, you know how that goes.
Yeah.
Seed, and then it sprouts, and these little, it grows branches and leaves, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so I wrote it. And I never, at the time, it was a standalone book. There was not supposed to be book 2 and book 3. Book 2 and book 3 came along because everyone says, what's next?
Yeah.
Is there another book? Is there another book? I'm like, nope, there's not. But I kept getting hassled. And so I thought, well, okay, let's see what I can do. And I came up with book 2 and book 3. So, but the exciting thing about book 1, so I had no idea how to write a story when it came to a novel. I didn't know about point of view. That was very confusing for me. I didn't quite understand that whole concept of point of view. So I just wrote, and it was my beta readers that helped me, because I was getting feedback like, I don't quite know whose point of view I'm in. And I'm laughing because I'm like, well, because I didn't necessarily choose a point of view. I didn't really know what I was doing. So I went and did a bunch of research, and I started to understand, oh, that's what they mean by point of view. So I took it into a limited point of view. So it's saying Cecilia's point of view. I would jump into someone else's point of view, but within a chapter.
Yeah.
But then that became problematic, because then when I handed off to my editor, the book one is basically laid out that it's a long journey. The first half of the book is a long journey between Cecilia and her love interest, Amelard. And then the second half, there's a whole bunch of characters come in. So it was in the second half that I did those multiple points of view. But in the first half, there was only one point of view, Cecilia's. And my editor said to me, she said, you could have a problem there with your readers.
Yeah.
Because, they're expecting one thing and then halfway through the book, it becomes something else.
Yeah.
So that was another kind of like flop down on the bed. What am I going to do? And I'm not shy. I will tell you, I cried. I did. I flopped on the bed and I cried because I knew that I had all this story that I had to tell, but I needed Cecilia, my main character, to know everything. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
But I had all these other characters, and if I'm in their point of view, they're able to feed things to the reader that help with the plot. But if they're not telling the story anymore, I'm like, but that's important story. How do I get it into Cecilia's point of view?
Yeah.
So that was a real struggle, a real learning process, but I did it. I figured it out and I was able to finish off book one with everything in Cecilia's point of view. And I went ahead and published it and I won quite a few awards with it. I was really excited about that. That was kind of crazy. I really wasn't expecting to win awards. Beginner's luck, probably. Maybe. So
that's what everybody says, but I feel like that it's funny because you said that because somebody just mentioned that to me the other day where I was like, I private messaged them like I had them on recently and I don't know if anybody's supposed to know, so I can't that they won an award, so I don't think I can say, but they're like, yeah, this is really cool. I was like, that is really cool. And they're like, oh yeah, it's because it's my book too. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I was like, no, it's skill. That's what it is. Because there's so many people. I just want to point that out because there's so many people that have a book one that don't, they can't get it out there, So if you're winning an award, I mean, I feel like you're doing it for a reason, and one of my friends where I saw where they said the same thing, and I checked out a couple of their like excerpts and stuff from their book, and I was like, no, I totally get why you won an award. I'm like, it's just skill is what I would have to say. So I don't think it's just you step into it.
Yeah, true. But one thing I'll definitely say is you do, as all writers should have beta readers, editors, and proofreaders. You just have to. And I think there are a lot of people that sort of skip those steps.
Oh, for sure. All the time.
And it's really important. I can't tell you how my story changed when my editor got her hands on it. She didn't change any of the plot or anything like that, but boy, I'm just there going, she has sliced out 10,000 words. But what has she done? Just cleaning up sentences where all of a sudden you think, oh, this actually sounds like a proper paragraph. This sounds like someone else has written this, but that's the skill of the editor to craft those things. So yeah, I lucked out with my editor that I got for Cecilia. She was really good. She really helped me a lot.
I think that's another thing too, is like, I think that is very lucky, like when you do find a really good editor, like I was talking to Sarah Chorn about this recently. We're friends on Facebook, and we were saying that, how it's just, I've known some people recently who are like, oh, they're like, I'm not going to say their name, but they're like, oh, it's just, this has not been a good partnership. I think you definitely, like you do luck out. I feel like and I know a couple of people where they've literally, like Michael R. Fletcher, like he talked about, he's shopped around quite a bit, he's had a couple different ones, and, some have worked out and some haven't. And I think, like people do need to be aware that it is a lot like, it's very similar to a co-author, like if you want to be with somebody a little bit more long-term, I think you definitely have to find a good fit. But sometimes it's a good fit and you're lucky, right? Like yours. And
I did get lucky. Yes.
Yeah.
He was definitely really good. So yeah, so that's sort of my writing journey in regards to, 3 books are out there. And yeah, we'll see what else happens.
Yeah. That's so interesting that it started off as a ballet. That's just such a cool, like,
started off as a ballet.
That's neat. Yeah, that's really cool.
I mean, not to jump the gun with other projects, but the laugh is the current project that I am working on, again, started as
Oh,
that way.
wow. Oh, that's cool.
So we can talk about that later when I want to talk about other projects.
Oh,
But
that's cool.
yeah,
That's really neat.
yeah.
Maybe that's like your thing. Maybe you should just write about, like, it clearly
Look,
worked.
I think it is
Keep
my
going.
thing. I think it is my thing. I took some classes at UCLA. So I'm in Los Angeles. I'm an Australian living in Los Angeles. And I took classes in LA, and one of them was story analysis classes. And my teacher said to me, he's like, you are amazing with dialogue. Your dialogue's amazing. He said, but sometimes you might want to partner up with someone when it comes to story. And I'm like, oh, okay. But I will admit, like, I've got other stories that I've written. There's one story I've got with a publisher at the moment. Fingers crossed on that one. It's a coming of age story. And it really just is more of this slice of life, very contained little story. But I definitely do struggle when it comes to just these bigger concepts. I just do. And if it wasn't for, I think, because I just wouldn't think to just think of this big story that Cecilia book 1 was, but it just helped to have my husband just plant out these basic things of, we're going to start off, because he had a certain feel about what the music was going to be. It's like, we need to start off in this very pastoral kind of innocent place. So we're in this forest. Then we're going to have these antagonists come in that are very dark. And I don't know, it just was like, that's what's going to happen. We're going to have this one person move from a very innocent place to this very dark place. It's a basic concept, right? But basic concept. And that's pretty much all I was given. But my head just never would go there normally. I think if that, I know that makes sense. Crazy,
no, it makes total sense.
But I'm certainly used to very smaller, like the book that is with the publisher at the moment is just a much more contained slice of life story. So anyway, getting back to that, when I was told in the UCLA class that, partner up with someone that knows bigger stories, that's what my husband does for me. He takes me out of my comfort zone. He just throws these crazy things, and I go, get really scared. I run away, go, I can't do that. Then I think about it. I'm like, no, okay, I'm going to do this. So yeah, he's been amazing. He's my biggest supporter when it comes to writing. He's awesome. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's very, very interesting. Like, I feel like I do get what you mean though, because like I wrote, like, I almost sold like 2 screenplays back in high school, and the only reason I didn't was because my old teacher was like, yeah, they're gonna butcher them, and he knew the people, and he was like, yeah, they're not gonna be anything like what you sold them. And I was like, really? And I was like, well, I might as well just keep them and do something with them later. And I thought about turning one into like a graphic novel. It's like kind of like a vigilante like type story, but it's like grittier, kind of like Sin City. So I'm glad I didn't sell it. It wasn't going to be enough really to do much, and it would have been like a feather in my cap, so to speak. But I was worried there's like a weird contract and stuff, and I was just like, no, I want it to be this thing. I was like, this is what makes it cool. So I totally get what you mean. And then I had to I was writing my first one like a screenplay because I had written 2, and then I was like, my the professor in college, and she was like, yeah, this does not work. She was like, you are forgetting all these other parts. So I definitely understand that. It was a huge learning curve because that's what I practiced with quite a bit. So I was like, oh, I want to do this for a while. And then I realized that that's not what I wanted to do, but it was still my writing style. So I definitely understand there. It's very different.
Yeah, I don't think I'll ever go back to screenplays ever again, other than converting my books into a screenplay.
Oh,
I will do that, but I won't ever write a spec script again. Yeah, it's not my thing. It's just not.
I could see your trilogy for sure being, like on TV or something like that. Like that'd be like really cool.
Same.
Yeah.
I don't actually see them as films. I definitely see it more as a story, because as we all know, there is a bunch of things you can't put in the story, especially when you're writing something from a limited point of view. There were a whole bunch of things that had to go away. But I'm like, but I've got all those stories for if we need to turn into a series. We've certainly got these other things that we can talk about. But thank you for saying that. I would love for it to be.
Yeah, it'd be cool. That was like the first thing I thought of when I was, looking at your blurbs and everything, and reviews and things like that, and just the covers alone just made me think, like, and the titles, I was just like, oh, this would be so cool. I was just talking to my buddy because he was asking me, like, you know, we actually just bought a couple books together today to share, just to get some extra ones and bring home. We've been like sharing them, and he was like, who do you have on today? I was like, well, I have this person, and I was like, Sandra, and I was like showing him. He was like, yeah, he's like, that would be really cool. And we've been talking a lot about like Patricia Briggs needed to do a TV show, and we were talking about like other authors that should do the same thing. So your name came up for that. And yeah, so we're really excited to book club. I think we're going to do book one fairly soon. I think it's in June or something like that. So pretty excited there. So yeah, but he said the same thing. He was like, oh yeah, for sure. I was like reading the blurbs, like, oh yeah, for sure. And he's like, that should be a TV show. And we're like really missing, you know, the older, you know, like, it's kind of sad that True Blood's like old now, you know, but like, and like some of the sci-fi shows, you know, that were out, and you know, it's just like there was a lot of really cool urban fantasy, and now I feel like there's not as much, and or even like grimdark fantasy, you know, they're just, I don't know, like that's just like, now that I'm into those types of books, or just different styles of, you know, of books, I just think that I just want more TV shows now. Like, you know, I'm kind of like, oh, I'm ready now, you know, like that kind of thing. Like I wasn't ready for Buffy the Vampire Slayer when it first came around, but now I'm like, I love it, you know. There's just, I don't know, there's just certain grim dark things that I got really into, or just certain things in fantasy where I'm like, I just feel like there's not enough on TV now. There's not nearly enough. Like I just eat up whatever's out there, and I just think like yours would be really cool, and it sounded really interesting story wise. I'm like, we were like, yeah, it'd be really cool to see it on screen, but not a movie, because I feel like they ruin them. So
no, I don't see them as movies either.
Yeah, it's interesting. You would have a leg up though to do your own screenplays though, like, and you know, and you have some experience.
I've already done, I actually did turn book one into a feature.
Oh, that's cool.
Submitted it to Nichols. I don't know if you know many of the screenwriting competitions.
Yeah,
got into the top 15%.
Oh wow,
and I got into the top 15% twice, and apparently that's considered good, because you can get into like a semi-finals one year and then just not place it all with the same script. Right? So it means that both times it went in, even with the different readers, it's still made, it's still placed in the top 15. So
that's impressive.
That was pretty exciting.
Yeah, I've known people that like do that, like write screenplays for a living, that, you know, for different like studios and stuff that tried that and didn't even get close to that even once. So that's like, that's really cool. That's impressive. That's really neat.
It's tough.
I think it means it needs to be a TV show. Like
I think so. I do.
Anybody listening, we got to blow this up so we can get
exactly.
more. My wife, she's like, you're horrible. She's like, you just want all fantasy and sci-fi on TV. I'm like, Law and Order has had its day. Like, it's fine. That's funny. For that second one there, so now I'm really interested for you to tell our audience. So what is your Cecilia series about? And you told us a little bit how you came up with this idea.
Yeah, well, I mean, the series itself is, how could I explain it? I guess you could explain it as a young woman's attempt to take all the bad out of the world, right? To just make the world good. But so book one itself is about Cecilia, who lives this very idyllic life in the Plockton Forest, and she knows nothing about the outside world. And then one day, raiders come in, sack her village, kill everyone except her, and then steal the young men. She was able to escape, and they steal the young men. And so she decides to go save her brothers. And along the way, she gets kidnapped by this other man. We don't really know who he is, but just this guy called Amelard. And the two of them coming together, that is the beginning of this prophecy that's in place. So in the book world of fantasy, yes, I hit a lot of tropes. So we have a prophecy, which is considered a trope. We have the chosen one, which is considered a trope, which is fine, because the thing is, people love tropes. If you're in fantasy, for the most part, they're very tropey. And so they're the tropes that I have. Cecilia's the chosen one. And the basic premise is the goddess of light is dying. And because evil has taken over, her dark shadow has taken over. And if the goddess of light dies, then everyone will die as well. So it's Cecilia's job to get to Vetus, which is our post-apocalyptic city, where we've just got a bunch of oppressed people and ruling senators that are, don't really care about their people. And she's got to bring light to this place. And bringing light means she's got to start a war. she's got to stand up and fight the senators. And what we find out with Amelard, this assassin guy who was supposed to kill her, he doesn't kill her, and he's got his own journey. He doesn't understand why he doesn't kill her, but he just doesn't. But it turns out he's a descendant from a long line of Croix-Latier, and the Croix-Latier were in place to protect the prophecy, quote unquote, protect Cecilia. So he's Cecilia's protector. So we have a slow burn romance, a slow burn love story in book 1 with Cecilia and Amelard. Oh yeah, our third trope is enemies to lovers. So they start off as enemies, and by the end of it, they are lovers. So that's pretty much book 1 in a nutshell of, I guess, when we talk about fantasy and superhero type things, we could call this an origin story. Yeah. So book 1 is the origin story about Cecilia figuring out who she is and what's going on, and Amelard figuring out who he is, because he was brought up to be an assassin. That's all he's known. He's never known how to protect. He's certainly never known how to love. Love is something he knows nothing about. And so he's like this onion with layers constantly getting peeled in book 1 as well. So that was kind of it. Of course, I don't, spoiler alert, I don't think it's too much of a spoiler alert to say that there was a battle and Cecilia wins. Is that a spoiler alert? I mean, it's fantasy. We all expect that there's going to be a happy ending. I sort of left it open with basically Cecilia, the narration saying, if the dark goddess comes back, Cecilia will be prepared, right? But that was it. I never thought there was going to be a book 2 and book 3. But there is a book 2 and book 3. So what I will say, book 1 can be read on its own. Book 2 can be read on its own. You don't need to read book 1. But book 3, no. Book 2 and book 3 are very much connected because I actually wrote them together. I planned out the story to go over 2 books. And so, book 2 does leave you with the cliffhanger, but the reviews I've been getting are, it's a great cliffhanger. And the fact that book 3's out there and it came out within 6 months, people aren't mad. They're not mad that they have to wait because the book is out there. So book 2 pretty much is the stakes just get ramped up really high. And if we talk about fantasy, this is where I would say this is true fantasy. Book 1 I'd more describe as mythology. I mean, it's fantasy in that, it's post-apocalyptic, and the post-apocalyptic story is kind of this steampunk kind of things. And there are certain things that there's no way in real life would happen. I mean, if there's no electricity in Vetus, which is pretty much a 20th century type city with skyscrapers, and we've got in the basement of this skyscraper are the prisoners that are using cogs and chains and rope to make the elevator go up and down. Like that wouldn't necessarily happen. That's like fantasy. That's sort of my sort of loose fantasy that can happen, if that makes sense. But that's as deep as it goes fantasy wise. Otherwise is really just the mythology. And in book 1, the mythology, I describe it as it lingers up high. It doesn't really come into the world per se. It does for Cecilia because she can hear the goddess of light talk to her, but that's about it. But in book 2 and book 3, we go deep fantasy because we have a group of people, the Terafelians. So book 2 is called the Order of Terafelian. And the Terafelians are sort of opposite to Amelard. Amelard's a Croix-Latier who protects the prophecy. The Terafelians have been hunting Croix-Latier their entire lives because they don't want the prophecy protected, because they worship the dark goddess. And their goal is to have her rule. And so through a ceremony, they bring the dark goddess down to earth. And so then it's this whole big thing where she builds this dark army of these near indestructible monsters, basically. And Cecilia's journey in this one is to find a weapon. They got this idea that there is this weapon that exists, and it's a big journey to go off and find the weapon. Our two lovers, Cecilia and Amelard, get separated. They go on separate journeys. And I did that because I wanted to explore Amelard this time. I got brave in book 2 and book 3. And in book 2 and book 3, I jump into different points of view every chapter. Remember how I said I tried to do it in book 1? I didn't quite know what I was doing. Kept it safe in book 1, kept it in one point of view. Book 2 and book 3, I felt comfortable enough to jump chapter to chapter into points of view. And I really wanted to explore Amelard, who's this assassin who had just the worst childhood. He just was, right from being a baby, he was built to be an assassin, locked away in what do you call it, a prison for days on end with no light, anything to try and get him to be stronger and to not have emotion and to not feel pain. He'd get whipped, he'd get beaten, and all these horrible things. And I wanted to explore his point of view of peeling off his layers. So I took him off on a separate journey, and I took Cecilia off on a separate journey. And in book 3, they come back together but we still keep their points of view. And in book 3, Cecilia finds out that she's the weapon. She was hoping they go on a journey to bring down the goddess of light down to earth as well. And they were hoping the goddess of light was the weapon, but Cecilia finds out that Cecilia's the weapon.
That's cool.
And book 3 is called the Caladium, and a caladium is a flower. It is a real flower, and it's a poison flower. And so that's kind of the twist. Cecilia has to poison the dark goddess, and to poison her, she's actually got to go inside her to poison her from the inside out.
Oh, wow.
I know, it's really kind of, flowers are definitely a theme throughout the story. The book
cool.
1 starts off with Cecilia being obsessed with a fairy tale called The Flower Princess and the Wolf. Well, it turns out that this fairy tale that Cecilia loves is the prophecy.
Oh, wow.
Boiled back down to a fairy tale.
That's cool.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
It was something that, and so she was obsessed by this flower princess, but she finds out she's the flower princess.
That's cool.
In that, so that's why the last book, she's the caladium, she's the poison flower, and that's how she's got to try and kill the dark goddess.
Oh, that's cool.
I won't give spoilers away, but she pretty much has to give her life. Like, that's the decision she needs to make. If she does what she does, then she's giving up her life.
Yeah, I said the weapon usually doesn't survive. So yeah.
So yeah, that's
that's cool.
That's
very like because when I was like reading your blurbs and reviews and things, and I was like really studying the covers and like your titles and things, and it felt very like it's the TV show like Into the Badlands. They just do such a great job with the post-apocalyptic but world building, and they have their own prophecies, they have this and that, and it was such a great show. I can't believe AMC ever took it off. But yeah, like there was a similar character who he's an assassin, and what they call him like a clipper, and like he has a very similar journey where he's an assassin and then goes to being a protector. And it's like it was such a cool, I think it was such a cool show because of his, like, you at first you just think, oh, he's just assassin, like he's the greatest killer that anybody's ever seen, and then it just turns into this huge thing later on where it's like you're just peeling back the layers. And so that's really cool for me because I feel like it's a very similar type of character study, and you really I don't know, that's neat. I'm very anxious for that character now, in particular, because I connect it with that. But I was thinking too, when you were saying this, describing your trilogy, like kind of reminds me too a little bit of like the feel of like what I really liked with like Crims Hemsworth and everybody in like Snow White and the Huntsman. Like,
oh yes,
I love that type of feel to it, where it's like you're in the forest and there's
Mhm.
these fairy tales and different things. I just think there's not enough things like that, particularly like on TV or or just even like stories. Like I'm trying to find more stories with that type of feel. So that's when you were describing it, that's kind of where I was thinking. And then the huntsman's got a protector and and things like that instead of killer. And it's
Yep.
like it would end up being a very cool type of relationship, I feel like. So that's really draws me in. And anytime there's an assassin, which I
I
don't
know
know,
everyone loves assassins. I know.
I don't know
I
if
know.
it's me. And like my friend, he goes, assassins and thieves are like your thing. I'm like, I know, I write about them all the time. I'm like, he's like, maybe it's because like that's the opposite of you. I said, I don't know. I said, maybe it's I always play the paladin character. I feel like I'm lawful good or something. It's like I think it's boring, I just think it's interesting to get into someone else's head. And assassins and thieves
I
to me
know
are
what
just
makes someone an assassin, right?
yeah,
What had to
exactly.
happen? Like what
Yeah,
had to happen in their childhood?
yeah.
One thing I hate doing, I really don't like writing characters that are bad just for the sake of being bad.
Oh yeah, it's pretty
Like I
pointless.
don't like that. Even the senators in this story who are awful to their citizens, they have their justification as to why they believe what they're doing is the right thing. And the lead soldier, who's the one that's leading the raid, who's on Cecilia's village, he has a tragic story where he started off good. But he just was asked to do more and more things, and even he turned awful. I really like to make sure that my bad people aren't just bad for the sake of it. And then I don't really like my good people to just be good, like Cecilia. I mean, okay, so she grew up in a forest and she doesn't really know anything else. And their world is all about nature and peace. But she's a pain in the ass. I mean, she's not perfect. I mean, she's kind of annoying. I mean, she really annoys Amelard, and I understand that. I mean, so she's not perfect. She doesn't want to be the chosen one. She fights it. She doesn't just embrace it straight away. She's like, hell no, I want nothing to do with this. A little bit like the author who wanted nothing to do with writing the story. She really resists her role. And so I try to write my characters to be human.
Yeah. Which I think is more exciting, because I think that's why everybody really enjoyed, the characters from Wheel of Time, because they were very, except for like even like Lan and Moraine, I feel like are very like, they don't want, like Lan doesn't want Moraine to die, Moraine doesn't want X, Y, and Z, and it's like nobody really wants to be there or do anything, but they have to. And I think that's just life, right? Like it's thrust upon you. And I think people connect with Wheel of Time more because the characters are more realistic. And like really if Obi, even like Luke Skywalker, right? Like I love that, like what the hero's journey is like. He didn't say, yeah, let's go fight the Empire. He said, no, I'm gonna stay here. Like, you're a crazy old man. And then his aunt, sorry, spoilers if you haven't seen Star Wars, but his aunt and uncle are killed by stormtroopers. And then he's forced to go on this, adventure. And I think that's how most people, do react, psychologically speaking. Like if a portal opened behind me right now and somebody was like, hey, we got to go save the Empire, or the kingdom, I'm like, well, I have school tomorrow.
Right.
Like my wife's upstairs. I'm like, what, like, can I go tell her, or can we bring her? Like, what are we doing? And I do think, like everybody always says, oh, I would do this thing, but it's like, really?
There's no
or would you be
chance.
like, Frodo or Bilbo and want to stay home and enjoy your house and read a book or, watch Netflix or something. That's funny. Well, that's awesome. Well, that sounds amazing. I think if any listener needs any more than that, you're on the wrong podcast. No hard feelings or anything, but so would you classify yourself as post-apocalyptic, sci-fi, fantasy, a mix? Why or why not?
As a writer, based on where I'm going with my next series, fantasy, absolutely. Cecilia, the Cecilia series, I call it fantasy, but when I think about a book, like I told you before, book 1 was more mythology and post-apocalyptic, but book 2 and 3 definitely go into fantasy. So yeah, I think I explained why I sort of thought it wasn't full fantasy the first time around, right? Because it was just more mythology. So, but moving forward, I would definitely be more of a fantasy writer than a sci-fi writer, which might seem strange because I'm actually a STEM girl. I'm a physics, chemistry, I don't know if you know, I mean, we call it 4-unit math in Australia. It's that mathematics that twists everything upside down. It's crazy stuff. And that was what I loved doing. So one would think I'd probably like sci-fi, but I don't. I don't like sci-fi because of the rules. Even though you can kind of break the rules, there still really has to be
different expectations.
Is total different expectations. And I do like the idea of fantasy that you don't have rules, but you have to make your own rules, if that makes sense. Like
they have to be your rules have to be, you can do your rules, but they have to be consistent. Otherwise,
exactly.
The reader gets thrown off.
Whereas sci-fi, I feel that you're going to get ripped to shreds a little bit by the sci-fi real people that are into it. If you go into something that's real, based in reality, but you're not, you know what I'm trying to say.
No, totally. I
that's
think about it all the time. Like, you know, like someone asked me today, like I'm doing this book, and you know, I typically do write fantasy, but like I talk to Dirk Ashton about this. Like I have certain ones where it's like it's more I like historical urban fantasy, if that makes sense. Like I'm doing like the Lost Roman Legion, and they fight zombies, and that's why they end up getting lost, like a bunch of them get killed. And I'm doing like a monster hunter thing with the survivors, and I'm like, that's not really fantasy, but it's not historical fiction, it's not really urban fantasy. So I'm like, historical urban fantasy I feel like is perfect. So, and I actually really like stories like yours, because like J. Diane Dotson, for instance, like she does sci-fi, but it's really like Star Wars. It's like sci-fi fantasy. Like I just think like when you have, like when I was reading your blurb and everything with like post-apocalyptic and, you know, some fantasy and maybe some steampunk, I'm like, that just sounds so cool, because I just think you took a lot of really cool things there and like made it your own. So I just get drawn into stories like that. So I just always find it interesting also too when people do something cool like that, but then classify themselves. Because I was talking to somebody the other day, they're like, I don't know what I am. I just,
it is
like
it is hard. And then it's the whole point of, is there some there's definitely dystopian elements in it, especially once you get to Vetus. It's a very dysfunctional society, and that's all dystopian is.
Cool.
Just a dysfunctional kind of world. And so I got some of that as well. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's really cool. That draws me in personally as a reader. So that's really neat. So when it comes to building a post-apocalyptic world, how did you go about your world building?
Yeah, I Google a lot of stuff. I find that I'm a very visual writer, in that if I've got the visuals in front of me, I can write it. I definitely I'm not good at imagining my own worlds. And I know that sounds really bizarre coming from a fantasy writer.
It makes total sense.
I'm just not. But what I am good at doing is finding bizarre things, but that bizarre thing sort of needs to get the inspiration. So, I mean, yeah, for specifics of a world, I definitely do a lot of Googling, get a lot of information, you know, stuff, visuals that are out there. I pin everything up on my wall. I put up a big storyboard.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, big visual storyboard. I still like pointing up here. You guys can't see what I'm pointing to, but I'm pointing to my wall up here.
Makes total sense.
And that, I can't tell you how much that really helps me. Like I'll be coming to a new scene, like where I know where the journey's going, and I won't really know how to start it. So I'll just look up at the wall, and the wall will tell me what I'm looking at, and that'll be what my character's looking at. So I just start describing what my character's looking at, and then it just sort of helps me get over that.
I like that a lot.
And off I go into my world.
Yeah.
So I think, I don't know if you can hear a bunch of clicking at all, but I've got an electronic cat door, and my cat is trying to come in. I'm like, you drive me insane. So I mean,
I guess love familiars. That's fine.
A post-apocalyptic world. What I did in Cecilia is I thought about, well, what are going to be some other groups of people that also survived the apocalypse? You know, we've got Cecilia's people who, when the war was happening, they ran away, and they went all the way off into the forest and sort of lived underground, had to do the whole lived underground for a little while, you know, to escape the fallout. But they came up and they built a society. Something, well, who else could exist? And again, just from looking online, I saw dams. You sort of forget that a dam has a whole bunch of rooms See a dam, you see a big wall.
Yeah.
You forget that there's a whole bunch of stuff happening underground. Bunch of rooms, you've got the big turbines, and I thought, oh, a group of people could live down here. So that's how I developed another group of people, which I call the ground people. But they were a group of people that were too scared to ever come back up. They wouldn't come back up because they were too scared of the soldiers of Vetus. So I had that group of people. Then you sort of like, well, what kind of society would be that kind of society that stays underground? Then for book 2 and book 3, because I expanded the world, I was like, okay, well, what other people could we have? So of course we got the Terafelians, and I had to think, well, how did they survive this entire time and not get discovered by the scouting soldiers? Like Cecilia's forest got sacked. How come they haven't got sacked? Okay, where could they live? They live in a whole bunch of caves on these mountainsides. But I found that because they exist. I was Googling, and somewhere, I think either in the Middle East or somewhere, I saw this wall and there was a bunch of caves, like a group of people years ago used to live that kind of lifestyle. So that was them. That's how they survived. And then I wanted to have a technological kind of group of people. So I thought, okay, you know how there's the big fallout shelters that you hear that the government's going to go, they're going to take 1,000 people, and they're going to be scientists, and they're going to be doctors, and they're, the top people. So like, okay, what if there was a group of those people? What's their society? And then the last group of people that I wanted to have, it's because my world is very much spiritual, with the goddess of light and her dark shadow. So we sort of got a belief system, faith kind of thing. I wanted to have a last group of people that were very science-based, that didn't believe, if I can't see it, I don't believe it kind of thing. And so that was another group of people that I developed to help tell the story of what's going on. So in regards to, I know your question was, how did I develop everything? I think I just I thought about in post-apocalyptic, who could be the types of people that could survive. And then when they did survive, based on either their environment, what would be their new society, or based on what they learned from when the world collapsed, right? What would they bring into this new world? And according to the science people, they felt religion was why the world ended up collapsing. They had their story about what happened, right? And so that's how I did that. If that answers, I don't know if that answers.
No, it really does. No, it really does. I had a short story that I was like, oh, I want to do this thing, and I just was kind of stuck with it. And then I was like, oh, this would make a really cool like post-apocalyptic like book series, like and I've always like been stuck. So that actually is very helpful. I've been asking different people. I have a few more people that are going to come on, and I've had a few today where like they have dystopian or post-apocalyptic. So I just always find it interesting to see how somebody else has solved that problem. I find it helps me, and I like asking those questions. I feel like it helps other people too, if they're thinking about those types of genres. So I think that was actually a really good answer, because I wrote down a couple of things there. It really makes me think. But I love your pin visual, like storyboard idea. Like
the wall.
I am huge visual.
Saved me. It has saved me.
It's a good idea.
Big time. I mean, even in my screenplay, I guess, with the feedback I got was, oh, you're very visual. And I laugh. I'm like, I'm not. All I'm doing is I'm taking visuals that are out there and just describing them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So but writers seem to like it. Big feedback I get a lot is people love the world building, the world that they get pulled into this world. So I guess I'm doing something right when it comes to that. And I can only think it's my visual board that's helping me in regards to that.
Yeah, it must be your thing. I'm definitely going to try that out for sure this summer. Like, because I always get stuck, and I'm like, then I go and I'm like, I get stuck writing. So then I'm like, oh, I'm gonna take a break. And then I go on Instagram or somewhere and I see great art and I'm like, ooh, shiny. And I'm like, I should write about that instead. And it's like, I get all the ideas. So I actually think that'd be really cool, because I put them on, on a Word document or something, but you can't really see it, like you have to scroll. I think actually I'm thinking of even like location, like putting up different locations of where my character goes in a story would be helpful, just to.
That's pretty much what I do.
That's
you know,
cool.
if I know that Cecilia is going through grassland, or even they got to go across the salt lake, I got a picture of a salt lake and I stuck it up there. It just helps you think about, well, when they're walking along the salt lake, what could happen to them?
Yeah.
You know, you just get pulled into it a lot more to think. Because at no point did I know, when I first started writing this, I didn't know that during the salt lake, Cecilia was going to pass out from dehydration. Like, you don't know that at the time. I just had sort of mapped out, went, well, here's the forest, here's Vetus. What are some things they can go through in the journey? You know, one's going to be a swamp, right, up over in a mountain, and they'll go through a salt lake. But I didn't know what was going to happen. But having that really helped map out, well, what can happen to Cecilia while she's Amelard's prisoner that can also help this relationship. You know, like if she passes out, this guy has to pick her up and carry her, and she's still his prisoner. But she's like, then it's a wake up for her. She realizes that this guy picked her up and carried her. He could have left her to die.
Yeah.
You know, so he does clearly care to a certain extent. You know, they're all just little things that for me helped pull out character and offer a moment of, you know, what can happen that will be push the plot, basically.
Yeah. Well, I gotta thank you. I think you just fixed 2 of my books right now.
Oh,
I'm stuck on just with this, because like I have this group where it's like kind of like a Lord of the Rings sort of thing, where they go to a lot of places to do this thing, and then and I'm like, I kept getting, I was like, well, I have these, you know, I still have the Word document I put, so I think I'm going to print them tomorrow and then put them up, because I think actually seeing where they go, you know, and just to have something and then to fill in later. So I think you just fixed 2 of my whole books, so I want to thank you for that.
It's very, very, I mean, I've read somewhere when it comes to your roadblocks that you got to, you know, put up. You can have the roadblock can be physical, like an actual physical block. You know, they run into a big wall that they got at, like in Game of Thrones. You know, they got the wall to get over. Or it could be, you know, personal or whatever the case. But nature, that was always a big thing. That nature can also be a roadblock. And so I think just reading that made me realize, oh, I can use nature. I can use the environment to drive, you know, some things that are going to happen to these people. It doesn't always have to be the enemy coming. It doesn't always have to be your antagonist, like another group of people, especially when initially when it's Cecilia and Amelard, technically she's with her antagonist, you know, she's sort of with him. So I was like, well, what can also help cause some more problems with those two? Anyway.
Well, you look at, like, I'm teaching the Oregon Trail right now, you know, and you look at how just devastating that was for people to travel, and you know, like just even like, you know, there were no bridges, so they're trying to get across rivers, you know, and just different things like that. Or or
there's
like
a couple of chapters already you can, you know what I mean?
I know, right? Well, I got these people that are like going past, like, it's kind of like the wall. So I did, like, when Game of Thrones first came out, like the TV show, and I was like, oh, okay. And then that first like episode or 2 where they showed the wall, and I was like, I said to my best friend, I was like, this guy George R.R. Martin stole my idea for the North for me. And then, you know, I thought about changing it for a while, and I was like, no, I'm gonna keep it. And I replaced, like, but then he also took the undead for me. I just want everybody to know that. So I already had undead in mind, so for a reason, and mine is different than his, and I think it's very interesting personally, as a historian. So but yeah, like I was like, oh, how am I gonna get them, you know, over this wall and then do this thing? So I actually really think that doing the visual storyboard is a really good
stole
idea.
from real history. We can still use him. It really doesn't matter. It's
I was telling my friend, and I was like, well, this is what I did. This is what he did, because he's read all the books, and he's like, yeah, it's fine. He's like, it's still a really unique idea. I'm like, that's fair. But I was like, I was so mad when I watched that episode. Like, I'm like, seriously. And then he had the Night's Watch or whatever, and I was like, really? And then they had like a codified thing that they said. I'm like, really? I'm like, how did I'm like, how did 2 people come up with so similar, you know, of an idea? So then I had to change my world building. Dirk Ashton talked about that, where like for Paternus, where like then somebody was like, oh, did you read, you know, Neil Gaiman? He's like, no, why? They're like, oh, some of your wording is the exact same as American Gods. So then he had to read that and he's like, gosh darn it, like you had to like change some things around. But it's funny how that happens. But yeah, I definitely think I'm going to be doing that, because they go to quite a few places and all the places are where things happen. So to me, that's perfect. I had this one where like it's like a giants crossing, and it's kind of like my nod to Tolkien in The Hobbit, where like the storm giants come out, and they think it's just called Giants Crossing because it's like a giant river and they have to figure out how to get across it. Well, then they actually see giants crossing and like go through the river and stuff. So I had such a cool picture that I found. Like, this guy had such a great illustration, and I can't wait to get the book done, because I want to tell him like, hey, I got this idea from your painting. It's brilliant, and yeah, it's neat. But yeah, I definitely think that is such a useful piece of advice. I think a lot of people I'm a teacher, so I feel like most of my students are visual learners, and I usually show them something, and I think we are, and
I am such a visual, not my husband. No, my husband can read a book, like a how-to, and he can do it. I'm like, no,
Oh,
you've
wow.
got to show me.
I gotta watch YouTube.
You've got to watch it. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you showed me, I could probably do it, but you can't I can't read it in a book.
I can't read instructions. It's meaningless to me.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Well, I look forward to printing my pictures off tomorrow now, and I'll send it to you when I get done, and you can see.
Well, if you run out of color ink, don't blame me.
No. I'm thinking like Charlie Day, where he's like explaining all his plot points. Got the yarn everywhere. So when it comes to character development, what exactly is your process? Sounds like you have some very interesting characters. So how did you make them this interesting?
Well, like I said earlier, I certainly don't want to make anyone evil for the sake of being evil. So with Amelard being an assassin, I had to come up with, how did he become an assassin? What happened to him with all that. And the same with Cecilia. I didn't want her to be just pure for the sake of being pure. She's and I wanted them to be sort of a yin and yang with each other, Cecilia and Amelard. Amelard's very quiet, doesn't talk. Cecilia's a chatterbox. So what was this dynamic of this guy? And then the other thing is, Amelard is very blunt. He says what he says, and he'll always say it in a very dry way, but Cecilia will misinterpret a lot of what he says. So I did that to just, again, add character dynamic with these two very different people. Then when it came to book 2, where I wanted to explore Amelard, I needed to have a similar kind of character like a Cecilia to draw stuff out, but I didn't want another female. So I decided to come up with an older character, his uncle, who of course he had no idea exists. And I didn't know he existed either. That's the brilliant thing of being an author, right? Let's pull in an uncle. And his uncle's name is Fabilian. And Fabilian is just a character. He's my comic relief. But he the same thing. He will just, Amelard can be blunt and dry and harsh to Fabilian, but Fabilian, it just rolls off his shoulder. He's like, it's all right, nephew. He calls him nephew. It drives Amelard crazy because he doesn't even know who this guy is. So I came up with this character who's lived in the mountains, and he's just this crazy mountain guy. And then when Amelard was going this journey, I knew I needed a third character. So I had Fabilian constantly pounding on him to rip his layers off. But then I also needed a reflective character that Amelard could look at and see innocence. So I had a younger boy, Oisin, who's 14. And I sort of like the idea of this 3 generation, father, son, child kind of thing, like this 3 generation. So that was, again, those 2 characters came about because I needed to peel Amelard's layers away, if that makes sense. So that's how I developed those 2 characters. When it came to the Terafelians, Wyndham is the leader of the Terafelians. He is actually inspired by Charles Manson.
Oh, okay.
Believe it or not, but not the evil Charles Manson that we think. I read Charles Manson's biography, and it fascinated me because, again, I wanted to know how did he become? He wasn't born evil, was he? And he wasn't. He wasn't born evil, you know, he really wasn't. He had a horrible upbringing, the stuff that happened to him, and then meeting the wrong people at the wrong time and blah, blah, blah. But I read this one scene, this one part where the police raided his commune, sort of in the north of Los Angeles here, and Charles was hiding in the bathroom under the sink in the cupboard. He hid under there. There's not this some brave kind of leader, you know. When the police came in, he hid, and the policeman said he was very polite. They opened up the door and he was very, very polite, and he just said, oh, okay, you know, like he didn't fight, he didn't do anything. And they said what struck them was how short he was. He was really short and timid and meek. And I just was like, wow. So that's kind of, I took that, and that's who the character of my awful people, you know, that want the dark goddess down here. That's how I created Wyndham, based on that kind of character. And I made him a leader who didn't really want to be a leader. He just didn't. Sort of like our bad characters of the world. When you hear about Hitler, his background is he just wanted to paint. He wanted to be a painter, and that sort of didn't work out. Same thing with Wyndham. I mean, Wyndham didn't want to be a leader. He was a leader by default because his father was a leader, and his father before him was a leader, but he doesn't want to be a leader. And so that's how I made him very conflicted and very troubled. And then I gave him a daughter to contrast that. I gave him a daughter who's exceptional. Saffron is exceptional. She can do anything. She can throw a stone and hit a target, you know, 200 feet away. You know, she's just amazing. Everything that Wyndham wasn't, her dad, he just can't do anything. He's useless. But what he can do is he's got a mind. The one skill Wyndham has is manipulation. He knows how to manipulate people, and that's his only skill. So I guess that's sort of how I create my characters. I start with one little bud, and then I'm like, well, I've got to give them more depth. I've got to give them more conflict. If he has a child, what will this child be like? I'm nothing worse than a daughter being everything that this man wanted to be but couldn't be. So that's sort of how I create my characters. I haven't sort of done it for a while. I think I keep a lot of things in my head. I think I'm lucky that way, that I've got a lot of friends who are screenwriters, and they say to me, how do you write a story? Like, how do you keep that novel? How do you keep it all together? And I just have the ability to keep a lot of things in my head. But I do have a character trait cheat sheet thing that I have in the past, you know, the whole thing, you know, what's their favorite color, what do they like? But I just sort of go through all those things in my head, and I just keep all those in my head for my characters. I think.
Well, I like how you said though, like you do contrasting characters, and my friend said his writing teacher, I believe, called it the reflecting pool method. Like, I'm one way, and you know, I have these things established, and then to pronounce them even more, you're the opposite. And it reflects more on me, you know, and then it goes back to me, and it like accentuates both characters instead of just one. And I was like, oh, that's a really cool way to put it. I was like, I never really considered that, you know, before. And then when I thought about certain things that I've read that I really liked, I was like, oh, that's like the same, you know, type of thing that this person did. So I've been thinking about that for two of my main characters, because I have one that like is more focused on like the future and forgets that his best friend is there, and that like really like these other things really don't matter, but he doesn't purposely use his friend as a means to an end. It's like, but he's selfish, like, and he doesn't even realize it, and you don't realize it till later on, and you realize that the other main character he's completely selfless, and he doesn't realize he's being taken advantage of until you get to the very end, and then it just blows up. And when my friend said that, he's like, yeah, it's the reflecting pool method. I'm like, what are you talking about?
You just did it naturally, right? You didn't realize you'd done it.
I was like, oh, that's cool. Well, he actually helped me, because the two characters were boring. I felt like they were just, he's like, they get along too well. And I'm like, yeah, that's fair. And he's like, they're too similar. So you might as well just cut this character. I'm like, well, I really like this character because the one character is me. I'm like, I've had friendships where I didn't realize for years or decades that people were taking advantage, or that I was just giving too much or something. And so then when he said that, I was like, oh man, I was like, yeah, I could really, do these opposite things that reflect. So I like how you did that, because that it seems a lot more interesting that way than just randomly attaching characters to, your two main characters. Like,
yeah, no, you gotta compare and contrast, I guess.
Yeah, a little hot and cold there.
Yeah,
a little fire and ice, if you will.
Yeah.
That's cool. I like that. So how did you decide on your covers? Because I really like them. Did you plan on them matching, or like right off the bat, or did that just happen? Okay.
No. What I did is I ran a competition on 99 Design.
Oh, that's cool.
Ran a competition, yeah. And I mean, because the good thing about that, which I didn't do, but you seriously can run a competition, and if you don't like any of the designs, you don't really, it's sort of 100 money back guarantee. They do it as. However, I didn't do that. I bought the level where it was like, no, I will guarantee someone will win, because I wanted to make sure that, I got the best of the best. Because I can imagine a lot of people would be like, well, if you're not even going to guarantee anything, I don't think I'm going to, So yeah, a ton of designs came in. We got a lot of designs, and I was getting a little bit disheartened, because the thing is, I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't quite know. I just didn't. I just didn't know. And then just this design came in, like that one, that came in pretty much how it was.
Wow.
And I was like, and I loved the idea. Like the one thing I said that I wanted was that I like the idea, like you can see here, there's little trees. Trees in here, like all these little things. Like I love a cover that when you first see it, you get a general idea, but the more you look at it, you see more little things. And so I sort of said that's sort of what I wanted. I didn't know what I wanted until I saw it, and I just sort of liked the idea that it was big and bold. And I think if you see that cover, you'll know it if you see it again. Whereas there's a lot of fantasy books out there, a lot of them, they look amazing. Like there's so many great designs out there, but a lot of them all start to mesh into one.
For sure. Sci-Fi's been doing that a lot lately too. Particularly on Kindle. Like they look great, but they're not unique enough. Like I have to either put on my wish list right away or take a picture of it, because I won't remember later. Like I'll just be like, oh, there was somebody, I think it was this author. And I totally agree with you. Yours like really stood out. Like, wow.
And so and then and so we kept, once the competition was done, we told the guy that Ivan, I told him that I want book 2 and 3 done. And so again, we just contracted with him to do book 2 and book 3. And again, similar thing, just making sure that each one, like, little things here, again, showing that you've got the city down there.
Oh, that's cool.
The mountains. They do have a blimp.
That's neat.
And then on the last one, it was sort of hard. It was definitely very hard to come up with, again, what was going to be on the top here, because we tried to do different things and it made the wolf look weird. So we did have to come back to the city again. But
interesting.
The stalagmites and stalactites for caves that we go through.
That's cool.
I don't know. It was just, I just sort of liked that we were going to keep the main image of the wolf, because that is such a huge symbol in it. The wolf, that's Amelard, and he just is in it through the whole thing.
Oh, that's cool.
And then
they look really good, like side by side too. I don't know, I think you shared somewhere on TikTok, and I just saw them. I was like, oh, those are really cool. Like, and I was like, it looked, because I saw the first, I saw Cecilia, but then when I saw all 3 of them, I was like, they just look really cool. I used to teach design, so I really liked them. They have a lot there. It's
a tough call. Like you got a book called Cecilia, right? And it's a female name. I'll explain why the book is called Cecilia. It is because it was based on a ballet, and Cecilia is the patron saint of composers. And so that's why she was called Cecilia, because of the connection with my husband. And so, but part of me, I was like, do I call it Cecilia? I was going to just go, no, I was going to maybe call it Vetus, come up with a word, because that's the city. I was going to come up with a word that might be a little stronger. but the more it sat with me, the more I just got used to it. And I'm like, no, I'm fine with calling it Cecilia. I wonder whether sometimes it might turn off males or not, but I'm surprised that I won a book, I won an award. And so we flew off to, gosh, I can't remember where, but they held a book fair for us. So we could put up our book stalls and sell our books. And I was surprised at how many like young boys would come over, and they loved it. Like they liked the idea that it, I guess, wasn't too girl, even though it's called Cecilia. I think they see that it's not too girly kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so they buy it. And they love, the big thing is they love reading that there's an assassin. That's the other big thing that they loved the idea of. So look, yeah, book covers are tough. They really are a tough thing. And yeah, I know all I can say is I'm aware that they're quite unique because they're bold. They're just very, I mean, red, white, and blue kind of thing. So yeah.
But I saw the first book, and then at first I was scrolling through TikTok. I was like, trying to get more horror authors to come on. Because I haven't been able to find like any. So if anybody's out there, like, come my way.
Oh, I can refer you a horror author.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay,
I'll refer
someone.
And I was like, oh, another horror author. One of like 10 I found on TikTok. And then I looked up, Cecilia, and I was like, oh, this is totally different than what I thought. And I was like really excited. Not that I wouldn't be excited for horror, but I wasn't expecting that. And I was like, oh, that's such a cool title, and it really caught me. And I was like, immediately went to the blurb, and then I was like then I looked up the other two too, and I was like, add to Goodreads. But yeah, it was so interesting, and I was like, oh, that's such a cool. It caught me off guard because I really wasn't expecting like your story to have that type of title. Like I was thinking that was more of like a horror title, and I really liked it. It really got me thinking like, oh, like that was different, and in a good way. And I just feel like sometimes it's like, same thing as book covers, right? It just gets very repetitive, and it's like, so I liked it. I just thought that is such a cool, simple thing to do that, that really, it drew me in right away as I was scrolling, which I think is a great advertising thing.
Definitely great to hear. Thank you.
Yeah. I was like, oh, that's cool. So yeah, as soon as I think I was the same way. I was like, there's an assassin and there's this and that. And yeah, I was instantly pulled in. And then I just like stared at the covers for a while, and I looked at them. I sent them to my buddy because him and I are studying a lot of covers to decide if we want to do something similar to your style, if we want to do like old school, like fantasy or, something like that. We're not quite sure, because we've seen some cool ones like yours where like a lot of people were doing like the white background and then a cutout of like a monster or a person, and then putting another one.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Like
that
like,
montage thing. Yes, I know.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yes.
I'm like, I have like 4 different books that we took pictures of on my notes. I'm totally blanking on all of them, but like a few people were doing that at first, and that was kind of a cool style. That was like something people were doing a couple of years ago. So yeah, but yeah, so then I said of yours, and he was like, what are we gonna do? I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, these are really cool. So yeah, he was like, you got to ask her how that whole process happened. So that's really cool. I have to
99 designs.
Yeah, you're like the 3rd person that this has come up with within the last 2 days for me. So I think it's fate that I'm destined to check them out. But yeah, we were really impressed by them. We talked about them for about 40 minutes when I found them on TikTok. So that was really cool. So speaking of TikTok, how have you used social media such as TikTok to grow your audience and build your author platform?
Yeah, social media. Honestly, TikTok has pretty much been it for me. I mean, I tried Twitter and Instagram, and for some reason, TikTok seems to be working. I tend to like it a lot more than the other platforms. I don't like social media in general. Like it is, if I think most authors we struggle because I'm getting used to being in front of the camera, but it was very difficult. It was very difficult at first. It was just this comfort that's totally out of my comfort zone to be on camera. And then just sort of TikTok is, if you're not used to it, I don't know if you remember the first time you went to TikTok, but it's kind of weird. It's like, what are these people doing? I don't understand what's happening. I don't understand.
It reminded me of like Vine back in the day, where it was kind of similar, but it was totally different. I was like, I was watching for a while, and I was like, I wasn't even going to do it until I had a friend who was like, yeah, I like shared my book and I got like 10,000 views. I'm like,
That's the
what?
thing.
Like,
I kind of wish I had got on it earlier. I did open an account like before the pandemic, but I never really did anything. I sort of wish before the pandemic, because apparently that's when it
it blew up.
exploded.
Yeah, I know a lot of
Especially
people.
Book Talk. Book Talk became really big. I was like, damn it.
Yep.
But that's fine. So pretty much TikTok is all I do, and then I just repurpose my videos on Insta and Facebook, using Reels and stuff.
Yeah.
I've been playing with I don't know if you heard about this, the watermark, that if you repurpose a video, that if you have the TikTok watermark, you don't get as many views on Instagram and on Facebook. And I've been playing to try and figure it out, and I think it's true. There was one video I posted on Insta where I kept, just had the TikTok watermark, hardly any views, took the watermark out, and like 4,500 views.
Wow.
And I just went, this is so interesting. So I'm not sure, but I kind of believe them when people say that the watermark.
I've heard that a lot recently.
And definitely I do agree that if you make the video inside of it, again, if you're using the native, whatever it is, TikTok or Instagram, what do you call it, user interface?
Yeah.
You use the native one, then you get more views. And I kind of feel that that's true as well, as opposed to doing something outside and then uploading it.
Yeah. My friend does that. Like they film whatever, and like he keeps it within, like the parameters of both, particularly TikTok for like 3 minutes or whatever. But they do that, and then he puts them on separately. And it seems to work for him. Like, I don't know if it's just his videos or, when he's posting, or like his content. It's pretty funny. But it seems to work for him. He gets far more views. Content? It's like it's comedy book talk, if that makes sense. Like he loves listening to, like he did one that was really funny. He'll probably kill me for saying this, but like don't like say anything, where he's like holding up the boombox, and he was doing it to like his TBR pile, because he bought another book, so he was like holding up his like speaker to his like TBR pile when his other books are over here. It was hilarious. So I think that one was like that was one of the first ones he posted, where he had the video and then he did it like posted it separately.
And he's not really seeing a difference. So I'm not 100% sure whether there's a difference or not. It is
interesting. Yeah. But then a couple other people told me that's what they did, and then theirs like blew up on both. So I'm like,
they did it separately, or they
they did the one video, and then so then they like, it was almost like an original on either one. So they didn't. So I stopped doing when TikTok asked me, I stopped doing it. I didn't even do that. So I think I might start recording just on my phone. Yes. And I think I'm just going to go to TikTok separately and then Instagram separately.
I definitely think so. And then at least when you're in TikTok, you can put the TikTok things on there, like the little words or whatever. So you're using something within TikTok. But definitely, I think the watermark, how like TikTok will say, do you want to share it to Facebook? Do you want to share it to Insta? I don't do that anymore. I don't.
Yeah.
Because
I think they're blocking it. Like literally.
Yeah, I do too. And it's not that difficult. A little bit of finagling in Photoshop to sort of get rid of the watermark, isn't it?
Yeah. I just thought it was so interesting that somebody else on Twitter was like, I just we just had this weird conversation about it, and on TikTok, and then I went on, I was like, wait a minute, I was like, this thing blew up. I was like, and then I went to his Instagram, this other author, and then his blew up. But I was like, how'd you do that? He goes, I just filmed. He goes, well, we talked about it. He goes, so I tried it. He's like 3 times, and it's worked way more than before. He's like, I just film and then I just do them separate. I'm like, that must just be, and I just talked to my best friend who's my tech guy, and we talked about that. And we're like, we think that they're limiting the views for TikTok on like their platforms, or that Instagram will do, let's say, the same thing or whatever. Like, so I definitely think that doing it separately.
I mean, with all this technology, they can search for watermarks, I guess.
No, totally. I think it'd be interesting to see if people try and do them separate. But that's very interesting. Well, I definitely think you're right about TikTok. I definitely think TikTok's the new one, because we were just talking about Twitter earlier, and it's like, I feel like it's like dead now. It's like ever since they changed their algorithm, which I don't know why they did. Like before, they'd be like on a Sunday or a Saturday, right? Self promo Saturday, like 2 months ago, would have been like, like 4,000 hashtags or something at any given day throughout Saturday. And now it's like, it's dead. And I'm like, I don't know why you would purposely do that to your platform, but.
Another test, so this is where we connected with each other. I posted about my video started things male writers never have to hear. And then I told a story about how the post office guy was like, I don't read science fiction or fantasy written by women, right?
Drove me nuts.
Yeah, right. Oh gosh. And I thought, well, let me tweet that out. You know how people will tweet a story. So I did that. Crickets. I tell that story on TikTok. I got so much interaction, and I had just started TikTok. I think at the time I had like, I really just started. I had like maybe 10 followers. That was one of my first videos that I had posted. It was very early on. And and so that's what am I on Twitter for? What's the point? I can post something real that happened, and I get way more interaction on TikTok than Twitter. Was crickets. I think I had one person liked one of my tweets.
I used to have like 150 interactions in a day. Like people would, vice versa. Like I would go and my wife's like, gosh, yours just like blows up. And, people were, I didn't have a lot of followers, but we were interacting constantly.
Yeah.
And now it's like, I might have, I checked the other day and I did it last week. I checked every day and I was posting constantly for the podcast on both and my update for books and stuff. And I literally had on average 22 a day. Now you're talking that's on average down 115 per, before they changed their algorithm, whatever that was, like before October. And I'm like, that's a lot of, just missed opportunity. But then TikTok, like you popped up. And like I said, I found you and 4 other people all within like the same sit in 10 minutes, like came on the For You page. And I was like, yep.
Oh, that's you know what? I'm curious about that. So that's what happened. I came down your For You page.
Yep. You came on my For You. And
fascinating. I've always wondered about that.
Yeah.
Because
and like
I flick through my page and I very rarely get new people. I don't understand. Did someone check a keyword? Was it a hashtag that they found me? Because most of my For Yous are people that I'm just connected with.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's so interesting.
It really is. Because I mean, we're talking
how
like
it works.
There's so many people like yourself that I'll go through. Obviously a lot of it's like spicy authors. If they do like grim dark or fantasy or something like Outlook or sci-fi or something, but I'm like, not really. But every once in a while I find somebody like yourself and I'm like, oh cool, like that's my kind of thing. So but I'm liking it though, because they throw more at me like Twitter used to, and I can sort through it on the For You page, and I found a lot of people to connect with that way, where now I don't even have to look anything up. It's just people are popping up on there. So I like that, because I don't want to do that much work, like I want them to, well, because that's their job, is to, and I think Twitter just doesn't do that anymore. Like I'm seeing people like, like so-and-so retweeted this. I'm like, there's no book talk, basically. There's no writing community. I'm like, I said to somebody, I was like, if I didn't have, so many connections on there, like, that's why I kept Facebook for so long, because I've spent years building up, different comic book artists, martial arts stuff I'm into, like, book stuff. I'm like, there's just too many people to, that I would have to move from one platform. Not everybody does Twitter, or Instagram or whatever. So, and now I've gotten more people on Facebook. I've become friends with more people, authors on Facebook than I have anywhere else. And it's nice because their algorithm change back to the mutual friends is doing a lot better. So I probably just friended like 50 different illustrators and authors on Facebook that I never would have found before. And it all started from 3 people that I found on Twitter. And then we got more and more mutuals. So that's been more helpful now than Twitter. It's crazy. And Instagram was good for me until they changed their algorithm too. Like I had started like my author Instagram and I had got up real quick to like 380 or something like that with followers. And then all of a sudden it was like, I'm still at 381, but I've had like 30 people like, followed me in the last couple months, and then they just disappear. I'm like, it's crazy how Instagram and Twitter just changed everything. And I think TikTok, it's been a lot better I know they changed things too. So, like I have limited views on certain things, but it's nice because I find more people like yourself, and I don't have to find them. You just pop up right up on my For You page.
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
it'd be interesting to see, like, I'm curious why, like, I know I'm following more
Right. Yeah.
authors, but yeah, it's hard because
You-
they haven't narrowed it down to the authors that I like or in my realm. They just throw me authors
Yeah.
or book talk or
Interesting.
whatever. But it's nice because it is nice to have more to search through than Twitter, because Twitter is just impossible now. Like, I'll go to the people and I'll look up fantasy author, indie author, sci-fi author, and it's like it just gives me everybody I've already followed and random people. It's like I want like top followers or something, like the author I was meeting today, Caitlin. It's like she's got 11,000 followers, and this and that. And it's like, why isn't she up there? It's somebody's got 48 followers, no offense, but like, and is just writing. I'm like, I want somebody that's published a book. So it's like, it's just so much to search through. It's like not even worth my time. And
Yeah.
I very rarely like if someone shared your profile, I would click on it and then I will go, oh, cool, I haven't followed Sandra yet, and I would follow you. But it is like a diamond in the rough right now. And I like that, TikTok is giving me more, because it's just
Right.
it makes it's better than the alternative. So
Yeah.
but yeah, it's been interesting. But yeah, I found you came up right on my For You page, and then I had a few other people that day too. I probably looked up you, the 4 other people, and then there was like 20 that I looked up, and some I was just like, it's not really my thing, but it was kind of, it was more my thing than what they were sending me recently. And ever since that day, like, I've had a lot more. So I'm like, cool, like, so just following your page, and then the 4 other people like already helped me get more people on my For You that were more
Right.
my,
Interesting.
yeah. So it was very, very interesting. I'm
Oh,
wondering
too
when they, yeah,
confusing.
it really is, because I'm wondering, like, like at least TikTok had the communities, and I'm
Yeah.
wondering, like, this book talk is really big, and it's
Yeah.
like there's so many little. I think we need like to do like a fantasy talk or something, or something, or a sci-fi talk or whatever,
Right.
so that it
Yeah.
narrows it down a little bit more. But it's better to have
Yeah.
more than less at this point. But yeah,
That is
it's
true.
interesting. I still can't believe that guy said that, though. That's like
Oh,
outrageous.
I know.
Like,
I know. Oh, I mean, you probably didn't see. I had another talk that I said afterwards, that what happened to me in Australia.
oh no, I
So I
saw
had
that one
that.
too. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, you did,
Yep,
yeah.
yep.
So that was like completely different. The post office in Australia, I sold like 3 books. It
Yeah,
was
yeah.
great.
Well, I literally like saw that, and I went and complained to my wife, because it happened to 2 of, because I like was interviewing a lot of like female authors for February She Wrote, and the stories I got were just outrageous like that. And I like was on my phone, and I like went and talked to my wife right after that, because I had 2 other friends who had just said they had the same, like a similar thing happen in the same, like the sci-fi community. And I like went to her, I was like, this lady said the same thing like that, that these 2 women said. I was like, she's like, I don't know what to tell you, like some men just suck or whatever. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like.
But for me, it was sort of like, people have their preferences. That's like, it's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
What I thought was fascinating was the fact that he vocalized it.
Yeah,
That's the thing. That's the thing. The
yeah,
fact that he actually chose to vocalize it. He could have just kept the thought in his head. I
yeah,
just
yeah,
don't. And then, I mean, I just didn't know how to respond. You're
yeah.
just not
Oh,
used to
sorry.
it. You just go quiet and you just go, oh, okay,
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
But,
Sorry for our audience. Sandra was
oh,
at the
yeah.
post office, and sharing a story on TikTok where a man said that basically, like, he didn't read, female fantasy authors, and I blew up as this channel knows, because I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, and and I said this quite a bit for February She Wrote too. Like, Elaine Cunningham changed my life with her Forgotten Realms books, and I would not be. She's like one of the 3 people that wrote that, and like Ursula K. Le Guin's another one, like top 3 that like definitely made me want to write. And I just can't imagine being one of those people that's like, oh, I'm not going to read this because a woman wrote it. Like, it's like, fine, don't enjoy all these great books by women authors then. Like, don't read, Frankenstein
And all
or
the
something.
books that are written by women but just have a male pseudonym, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
the thing.
Oh,
Half the time.
that
Half the
drove
time
me
you don't
even
even realize you're
crazier.
reading a female. So
Yeah, that drove me crazy, because my friend Jennifer has to do that as J Swift, so that people don't realize, like, in sci-fi, that she's a girl. And I was like, I blew up at that. I was like, seriously, like, great books, great covers. I'm like, you should be able to put your name on it and people should buy it. Like, I don't know.
I went through that. I did go. I think I don't know. I'll just speak for myself as a female. I went through that period of like I said, do I change the title of the book from Cecilia and do I change my name? Do I do the whole initials, SL, blah, 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 you know, like to step away from being a female? But then I was like, no.
You know, I actually like that this new statistic came out recently, and this is probably why I'm drawn to fantasy community more, is that like 68% of Amazon Kindle sales for the fantasy community were driven by women, and or at least that identified as women on, you know, like Kindle or whatever. And to me, like that's very telling. And I was talking to my best friend about this in terms of my books, and I was like, well, I have a lot of strong female protagonists for a reason, because I find them interesting to write and find them interesting to read. And some of my favorite characters have been female, like Princess Leia. I still think is one of the greatest characters that, you know, and she's just a total bamf. And I, like my mom, my grandma, like my aunts, I've been surrounded by strong women my entire life. So I'm a man that's not afraid of them and respects them. So I like them to pop up into my writing. So I just, you know, but I have certain characters where, you know, we talked and we were like, these characters are like, I flip-flop genders for a few where I'm like, okay, like, you know, I have a couple people read and a couple, you know, female friends of mine who write, and I'm like, so what do you think? Like, you know, will this character be better as a man or a woman? And I flipped quite a few recently, like back and forth, just because of different things. And I find that, you know, I just find that outrageous. Like, I'm just like, I don't know. It's such a stupid problem to have. Like, authors have enough to worry about, and
I know.
for you ladies to have to worry about, oh, I can't put my name on it. It's like, no, you should be able to put your name on it. Like, that's your work. Like, that just really drives me nuts. So if anybody does that, let me know and we can have a TikTok conversation. But yeah, and I can explain why you're wrong. But yeah, that was outrageous. So yeah, so guys who are listening, I kind of blew up on TikTok and privately with some friends on that. So I did not like that. But I was glad about your Australian story. I thought that was
that was awesome.
That was like karma.
It was
like
hilarious.
Yeah,
it was.
It's really funny. Oh man, that day I was ashamed to be an American man. That's all I have to say. I was just,
no,
like,
you're awesome. You're amazing.
It's like, stop giving us a bad name, man. Like, geez, oh, pizza. So for that last one, so do you have any news, promos, updates, or current projects you would like to share with us?
I do. Promo wise, I have promo codes for the audiobook of Cecilia, the Order of Terafelian, book 2. I can't tell you, Daniel, it is really difficult to give away audiobooks. I did a giveaway for book 1, but the actual physical book got a ton of people. Yeah, I want it. Audiobook, I mean, I've got a few people, but crickets, people don't really want audiobooks. So anyway, now granted, this is limited to US and UK, but that shouldn't matter. That's still a big audience.
Yeah, that's true.
I can't give away these audiobooks. People, you know, so anyone, if you're an audio person, will give you, just, I don't know how they Google me, I'm easy to find. I will give you an audiobook for Cecilia, the Order of Terafelian. And then upcoming projects, I am starting a new fantasy series, again, based on another ballet. very loosely. My husband was, again, going to do this ballet. Not really sure it's going, but he was loosely telling me the story, and I just sort of wasn't. And I knew he was telling me because he wanted me to take it on as a novel. I'm like, I just, so
not again.
Drive, and we were talking, and I said, the only way this will work for me is if I can put magic into it. And he said, yeah, that's fine. And I went, oh, okay. So it's so different. It's not even close to what he pitched. And his story was just really very basic. I think his story was more inspired by Russia, what's happening with Russia, you know, how Putin is sort of coming to the forefront again, you know, just this and anyway, that's all that was. So my series is called The Isles of Tarimdra, and I'm in the very early stages, but I've had to do all my backstory on it. It's much bigger than Cecilia. I'd probably say it's 10 times bigger. It's just huge in regards to the backstory, the mythology. I've got already 50 pages in my document. I like to have these documents where I compile all my pictures that I tell you about. Compile all the pictures And just getting the backstory to get us to present day is already 50 pages.
Oh, wow.
Figuring out what's happened. To get into this, I rewatched Game of Thrones.
Oh, cool.
Did a marathon, rewatched it because, oh gosh, I'm watching it going, you read interviews with George Martin and he'll just talk about how he was writing for television and he just got this image about this family. I mean, these I guess family going off and finding the dire wolves. And then I think he said that was kind of the main thing. That was his first thing he had an image of. It's like, oh my gosh. And so then he comes up with this whole series. But even in book one, we're hearing about the White Walkers and the Wall, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he would have had to do all this backstory first. He would have had to know his mythology, would have had to know about the children of the forest and the White Walkers. He may not have known how the White Walkers were created. I have to wonder about that. When did he decide that happened? Yeah. We'd have to at least know basic stuff, that these White Walkers existed and the children existed, because Bran, very early on, Bran falls and he becomes the third-eyed raven.
Yeah.
You know, like all these weird things that he had to have known right from the start. And the only way you can do that is by going back in history, going back. And so this time around, I went, okay, that's what I'm going to do.
Oh, that's cool.
From right when my world was created, who are the gods? Who are the gods that created this world? And how did we get to where we are right now, kind of thing. And it's been crazy. Really crazy. But so anyway, magic is involved, and the premise is where we are today, magic exists, everyone's forgotten how to use it. That's sort of where we are today. So this is going to be this big epic story about one guy, again, going along the whole thing with Putin. I read up about Putin and I'm like, why is Putin doing what he's doing? And apparently it's a love. He misses what Russia used to be. He misses the old Russia kind of thing.
He actually watched the Berlin Wall fall, actually, which I thought was interesting. Like,
right. So yeah, got a similar guy who's descendant from this line. If he looks back in history, there were wizards, not anymore, and he wants that old world.
That's cool.
He longs for that again, and so he finds a way to bring that back. But the whole reason that all went away is because it got too dangerous and everything went to pot. And so our protagonist, female Regan, she's got to stop him, you know. And the only way she can stop him, right, is to also tap into magic as well.
Oh, that's cool.
That's kind of, so it's the rebringing of magic back. So
that's awesome.
That
sounds cool.
Yep. And so the research is done. So technically tomorrow, tomorrow is my plan to actually start writing.
Oh, wow. That's exciting.
Get the first words down.
Oh, that's cool.
So yeah, that's going to keep me busy for the next couple of years.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. Well, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
It is funny that though you do say, like, when you said like the audiobook, like I just laugh because I'm like, I did notice that with another one of my friends. He was like, yeah, I'm just trying to get some reviews. He's like, nobody's taking them. And he goes, but then I sold more. And I'm like, you sold more? Like you tried to do a giveaway and nobody wanted it, but you sold more? He goes, yeah.
That's interesting.
I was like, okay.
Wow.
And I'm like, part of me I get, because like I have like a lot of friends, you know, that are authors, and I'm like I will literally like buy their Kindle book, particularly if for some reason it's on sale or whatever. I'm like, okay, 99 cents for sure. And then I'm like, especially if I like it, then I save up and buy the print. And then once I read it, then I buy the Audible. And like one of my friends was like, oh, I'm giving it away. I'm like, I was like, no, it's gonna be really good. And he told me about like the story, you know, of like how it came to be, and it was so rough. And I'm like, yeah. And I was like, I'm just gonna pay the like $20. He was like, what do you mean? I was like, I'm just gonna do it. So I'm wondering if it's that, because some people, you know, like really do know how much goes into the audio book. Like I'm
There's
just
a lot that goes
it's weird.
into it.
But it's weird that you can't give it away. Like that's strange.
Yeah. And speaking of that, I'm actually going to do the audio of book 3 myself. Got narrated
that's cool.
book 1 and book 2. For no other reason, book 2 took a year, and that kind of
a long time.
my audio girl was great, but I understood it was the pandemic and things happened. But boy, a year was just such a long time.
It really is, yeah.
I thought I'm going to try and see how it goes, but I'm a little bit worried because I can barely get through a paragraph without flubbing. So I'm not sure how it's going to go. But again, being married to a composer really helps. I've got an amazing microphone that he's given me. He put up, can't see, but I've got all these sound blankets around. And
oh,
so
cool.
We'll see how we go. He's completely set me up with everything. That's my other goal as well, is to do the audiobook for book 3.
That'd be cool. I would love to hear how that goes, because I've heard people like, who, like they I think Michael R. Fletcher was talking about this on Wizard Words and Words, but they he did that, I think, or is about to do that. So he's been looking up all sorts of stuff and got like a new microphone, and he's got a pretty good, he used to be a musician or whatever, and so I he's got a pretty good setup. But I think Jed Hearn did his too for Thunder Heist or something like that. So they were talking about how they looked up different things that people suggested and stuff. And I've known quite a few people have done their own recently, because the same thing, they were like, oh, I don't want to wait a year. Like some people I know got like a year and a half, and they're like, well, my book 3's coming out and I have to get it done to generate sales for for book 3, and it was cheaper that way. So I'd be interested to see your process for that and how it goes.
And I just, because I've done a couple of test reads, and even though, I mean, you probably know this as an author, do you read your stuff out loud? I mean, you're told to do it
all the time.
I read my stuff out loud. But honestly, oh my gosh, it's not the same when you're reading it out loud for an audiobook. It's amazing. It's
totally different. Yeah.
All of a sudden I'm like, I think I'd want to change it. Like all of a sudden I realized how sometimes some of my sentences are a bit tough or whatever, which I didn't notice when I read it out just casually to myself. But when you're reading it out and trying to do inflections for the listener. So I actually want to do it for learning. I just bite the bullet and do it to just see how much it helps me as an author.
Well, my friend does that. He was doing out loud, but then when he tried to do his audiobook, he was like, I couldn't do it. He's like, I realized that, for him at least, he's like he learned a lot about his writing from it. So he recorded it, did the whole thing, and then he listened to it to fix book 2. So I thought that was so interesting.
I can see, I can see that. I'm like, damn it. You do learn a lot by doing it yourself. So
I think it'd be interesting. I thought about doing that, just adding it one way through and recording it, and then so I have a 45-minute drive to work and back in another town, and I thought, well, that would be perfect, because I could just put it for myself on YouTube and make it private and listen to the different chapters on the way to work, and then I could be like, ooh, that was horrible, or something before publishing it. So I think that's what I'm going to do. And we talked about my tech guy and I how to section it and stuff to do notes and things. But and I was gonna have a recorder in the car, so then I'll just turn on the recorder through my Bluetooth, and then I'll just record notes or whatever. And I was like, well, I can get a lot of work done that way. But it's interesting though. But I'll be interested to see the process for you, and the do's and don'ts and things like that. I always love when people do stuff like that. That way we can pick their brain and see how it went, and things like that to improve. So that's cool.
It's going to be interesting.
It's really neat. All right. Well, Sandra, thank you so much for coming on. Like I said, I was really excited. You're my first TikToker to pop on out of 5. So I'm really anxious to get the rest of you guys on here. And anytime you want to come back, you got anything else going on, once you get the audiobook done or anything like that, or you're just like, oh, I really want to talk about this thing that happened or that I discovered, or writing tool, anything, you just let me know and we'll set up a time, and we'll get it going. So
thank you, Daniel. I so appreciate you doing this, and thank you for inviting me. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, anytime. I got really excited about printing off my pictures for tomorrow, and I will make sure that I send it to you on email or TikTok, that we could see when I put them up. I'm really anxious to get that going. I already have the little kind of like a roadmap kind of thing. I already have some of those tools already around, so it'll be cool. And I'll be a Charlie Day meme before you know it, so that'll be really exciting. Make sure everybody who's listening, you check out the descriptions for anywhere that you have found this podcast, so you can check out Sandra's social links. They'll go right to her books, author profiles, things like that, Goodreads, for instance. So make sure you guys do that and check out her books, and maybe go check out her audiobooks too. Yeah, Sandra, I hope you have a great rest of the evening, and I hopefully will talk to you soon on TikTok, my friend.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a good one.